The summer air in Frederick, Colorado once felt warm and familiar, but as the months crept toward tragedy, something colder seemed to settle inside the Watts household. Long before the world learned Chris Watts' name in the darkest way possible, there were quiet signs, tensions whispered, emotions buried, moments overlooked. At the center of it all was an uneasy friction that had been brewing for years, a growing rift between Shanann Watts and her mother-in-law, Cindy Watts. To outsiders, it seemed like normal family disagreements. But to those who looked closer, it carried the weight of something deeper, something that gnawed silently at the family's foundation. Chris found himself caught in a place few men ever want to be, wedged between the woman he married and the woman who raised him. Friends recalled moments when Shanann would return from a visit with the Watts family exhausted and hurt, describing cold stares, sharp comments, and an unspoken disapproval that clung to every interaction. Cindy, on the other hand, insisted she simply wanted what was best for her son, though her definition of best never seemed to include Shanann. As the pressure built around Chris, his responses became quieter, more withdrawn. Investigators later noted how he often avoided confrontation altogether, choosing silence where honesty might have eased the tension. But silence can grow heavy, and in this case, it created cracks that widened with every passing month. And as these hidden dynamics simmer beneath the surface, make sure you're following closely. If you haven't already, subscribe to Nightfall Detectives so you never miss how the smallest details can lead to the darkest turns. But the most unsettling part came just weeks before everything fell apart, a moment where Chris seemed genuinely torn, his eyes distant, his smile forced, as though he was being slowly pulled toward an emotional breaking point no one else could see. The deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became that the friction between Shanann and Cindy wasn't just a passing disagreement, it was a pattern woven through years of strained encounters. One of the most infamous moments, remembered by both families, was the Nutgate incident. What seemed like a simple argument over a child's food allergy spiraled into a harsh divide. Shanann felt dismissed and disrespected when her rules for her daughters were ignored. Cindy felt accused and misunderstood. And Chris, standing between them, chose the easiest path. He shut down, offering no defense for his wife, no challenge to his mother, just an uncomfortable silence that echoed louder than any words. Family gatherings became tense rituals. Subtle remarks turned into pointed comments. Whispered frustrations grew into open resentment. And every time Shanann tried to address the conflict directly, it seemed to push Cindy further away. At times, it almost appeared as if Cindy believed Shanann was pulling Chris away from his family, reshaping him into someone she no longer recognized. Friends later told detectives that Shanann tried to be patient, hoping Chris would eventually step up and take a stand. But Chris had always avoided tension. Each unresolved moment planted roots of discomfort deep inside him. And whether he realized it or not, he was being shaped by the two strongest women in his life, one through love, the other through loyalty. As these layers of conflict unfold, take a moment to support the investigation here on Nightfall Detectives. If this story is revealing pieces you never knew, go ahead and tap like. It helps push this investigation to more viewers who follow true crime closely. By midsummer, something had shifted. Cindy allegedly told Chris that Shanann was too controlling, that he'd lost his voice. It was a comment investigators later highlighted, a spark that may have ignited emotional turmoil far deeper than anyone understood. In that moment, Chris seemed to fracture just a little more. As the weeks inched closer to the breaking point, investigators noticed something striking in Chris Watts' behavior. He was no longer just distant, he was living two completely different lives. At home, he moved quietly, offering short answers and hollow smiles, drifting through the days with an emotional numbness that Shanann tried desperately to break through. But outside the house, away from the tension between his wife and his mother, he was becoming someone else entirely. The affair he had tried to hide from the world became a second world he could escape into, a place where he didn't have to confront the conflict that waited for him at every corner of his real life. This secret life added another layer to a man already feeling pulled apart. Investigators later described Chris as emotionally cornered, pressured by guilt, suffocated by expectations, and haunted by the disapproval that seemed to follow him from his childhood into his marriage. Cindy's constant insistence that Shanann controlled him may have echoed louder in his mind during this period of emotional weakness, especially as he sought validation elsewhere. Phone records painted the clearest picture. Late-night text messages, secret calls, moments where he'd step away from the house just to breathe without conflict, each detail showed a man unraveling. And while Shanann wrote hopeful messages to friends, trying to make sense of his behavior, Chris seemed to withdraw deeper into a world where he didn't have to choose between the women pulling at his loyalty. As these hidden layers of the investigation connect, take a moment to share this video with someone who follows cases like this, because the next revelations dig even deeper into the psychology behind what happened. Chris told a close friend during this time that he felt torn in half. Investigators didn't know then how terrifyingly literal that feeling would become.
It was always a little strange that she always said a lot of things about Chris in front of me that I didn't like. Like, this isn't the kind of person I would date. He doesn't know how to do this, or he doesn't know how to do that. He looks like a skater boy. Look at his hair. Look how much stuff he puts on his hair. It was just on and on and on, and I just got a bad feeling.
And they got married in 2012. Did they get married in North Carolina?
They did. Mm-hmm.
How was that?
We didn't attend.
Really?
Mm-mm. We didn't attend because Shanann and I just couldn't get along, and I didn't like the way she treated him.
Investigators didn't stop with Chris's actions. They turned their attention to the emotional ecosystem surrounding him, and that meant confronting the question many had whispered but few dared to say aloud: how much influence did Cindy Watts really have on her son during those final months? The interviews were unsettling. Cindy insisted she loved her son and meant no harm, yet her words often painted Shanann as overbearing, dramatic, or controlling. Each comment seemed harmless in isolation, but investigators noted how consistently they chipped away at the image of Shanann, feeding a narrative that Chris may have internalized far more deeply than anyone realized. There were moments in the interrogation transcripts that stood out, times when Chris seemed to defend his mother's perspective more than his wife's reality. He spoke softly about how torn he felt, how he wished everyone could just get along, yet beneath those words was a troubling pattern. He had spent years avoiding conflict by aligning with whichever side required the least resistance. And when his mother expressed her resentment, her disappointment, her belief that Shanann had taken him away from his family, those words didn't vanish. They settled in him like dust, slowly building into something toxic. Detectives revisited phone logs, searching for any signs of conversations that could shed more light. They found messages from Cindy that seemed harmless on the surface but carried a sharp emotional undertone, questions about why Chris had changed, why he let Shanann dictate things, why he allowed their family to drift. To someone emotionally stable, those comments might have rolled off. But Chris was unraveling, and these messages may have hit at the worst possible time. As the emotional tension swelled, remember to stay close to this investigation. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead. Nightfall Detectives brings you the hidden truths no one else is piecing together. Everything built toward a final moment investigators now believe may have been a psychological trigger, a conversation Chris never repeated, but one that clearly left a mark. When investigators finally pieced together the emotional thread surrounding Chris Watts in those final days, a haunting picture began to emerge, one shaped by secrecy, guilt, and a pressure that had been building for years. Chris had withdrawn almost entirely into himself, moving through the house like a shadow, avoiding eye contact, avoiding conversation, avoiding the life he once claimed he wanted. Shanann sensed something was deeply wrong. She wrote messages to friends pleading for understanding, hoping Chris was just overwhelmed, hoping the man she married was still somewhere inside him. But the emotional conflict gripping Chris had grown into something far darker. The tension between his loyalty to his mother and his commitment to his wife formed an invisible storm within him. Cindy's long-held resentment toward Shanann, whether intentional or not, echoed in Chris's mind at a time when he was already emotionally vulnerable. Every accusation that Shanann controlled him, every comment suggesting he'd changed, every moment of disapproval layered onto a man who was unraveling under secrets he didn't have the courage to confront. It didn't justify anything he did, but investigators believed it created a psychological pathway, a narrowing tunnel where Chris felt trapped between two realities he could no longer manage. In those final days, he barely slept. He paced. He avoided messages. He lied with a smile that never reached his eyes. And when the breaking point came, it wasn't explosive, it was disturbingly calm, the kind of silence that chills investigators even now. As this case closes its final chapter, if this story has gripped you the way it continues to haunt those who studied it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Nightfall Detectives will keep uncovering the hidden truths behind the darkest cases. In the end, Chris sits alone in a prison cell, the echoes of every ignored warning, every emotional fracture, and every unresolved conflict hanging over him like a shadow that will never lift.